Hey guys, welcome to the Notice to Airmen channel. In this video, we will have a look at the Rutan Model 61 Long EZ, a tandem, two-seater, home-built aircraft designed by Burt Rutan. This aircraft for Microsoft Flight Sim was created by Indiafoxtecho Visual Simulations and is currently available only on simmarket.com, although in the marketplace soon. The Long EZ is an interesting aircraft and is a delta wing aircraft with wingtip or winglet rudders and a rear engine, I believe a Lycoming, with pusher propeller and canards. A very interesting setup. These aircraft are very efficient for long-distance flights and have a number of unique abilities and flight characteristics. After purchasing this aircraft, I was a bit disappointed to find that according to the developer, Microsoft Flight Sim does not support canard-style aircraft, and that the flight model was based on a traditional style aircraft instead. To be fair to the developer, he seems to have been upfront about this in a statement that I read after at the bottom of the more details page. I probably should have read this before purchasing, but it says, quote, "At the moment of the initial release, MSFS does not properly support canard planes. The plane may exhibit a behavior that may differ from the real aircraft in extreme conditions." It's the flight characteristics that I was most excited about with this particular aircraft, as canard-style planes have very unique stall characteristics due to their smaller forewing that will stall well before the main wing does, therefore bringing the nose down and correcting that condition. Canards are particularly good at preventing stall spins. Canard configurations are very complex compared to others and can be very unstable, but if done right can offer a number of benefits. I was very interested in playing with this in Microsoft Flight Sim. We'll have to take the developer's word for it at the moment that this restriction is due to a limiting factor of the simulator and that when or if it arrives, he will provide an update. Let's have a look at the model itself, as you've been viewing in the background here. This model comes with 6 liveries and they're all very nice. The model isn't going to set any new standards in any respect or raise the bar, but I don't have any complaints either. The exterior textures hold up well under most scrutiny and just fine while at standard distances. The download does come with an 8K paint kit Photoshop file for you to create your own liveries. That's very nice and definitely adds to the value of this add-on. Moving to the interior, I'm guessing the first thing you'll notice is the scratches and smudges on the cockpit. I realize this is just a rental, but it looks like the last user got into an argument with a Wolverine in here. I don't like perfectly clean cockpits in models. I do agree it adds to the realism of the cockpit, but I do suggest toning it down a touch. I would like to comment to any developers listening that the majority of people who are going to be critical about your model are probably people who spend 100% of their time in the cockpit. I had to be told by a viewer during some of my first reviews to include exterior shots while flying. The truth is, it just never occurred to me until it was mentioned. I just don't flip to exterior views for anything while I'm flying. I think this is important to take into consideration when modeling the aircraft, as it's these interior textures that I'm mostly staring at, and it's these textures which seem to take a back seat to the exterior textures, it seems. I may be wrong here, but I don't think I'm alone. I have re-recorded what I'm saying right now over a prior recording about the textures. I was much more critical. To be honest, after flying this for a number of hours in testing, I'm much more on the fence than I was with my first look at the cockpit in just the hangar area. There are clearly times when I look at the cockpit and feel the textures aren't good enough for a next generation platform. But then there are other times while I'm flying, maybe it's the lighting or just the situation or the shadows, and it doesn't feel so bad anymore. I think the takeaway here is that the textures don't hold up under scrutiny, but don't affect your flying experience that much, as when I'm actually flying and at the default viewing distance, I don't notice it. Some of you may have started to notice that this is a bit of a sticking point with me, but this is a next generation platform and I kind of expect next generation models, especially interior models, at every price point. The interior model itself is actually pretty good and just fine, except for those gauges again. This is the second time I'm seeing this, and I hope it's not becoming a trend. Not all of the round surfaces in this interior are so simple, so I don't know why they chose to simplify the gauges and a little bit of the upper above the instrument panel, the glare shield. But the wheel wells and the compass and many other surfaces look just fine, so they could have made this more complex. The gauges themselves, both the legibility and the resolution and reflections, look great, better than great. They really do. They're just surrounded by bad bezels. So this could easily be fixed, in my opinion, because the majority of this interior looks pretty good. All right, let's start cold and dark and have a closer look. In front of us, we can see our fixed canards, which hold our elevators, providing pitch control, and a lifting surface, which allows the wings to be smaller. Obviously animated and modeled here, which is nice. On the main wing, we find our ailerons and the rudder on our, or the rudders, I should say, on our winglets. There's one on each side, and they go out, not in. The speed brake is animated, as you can see, just under the pilot there. And the canopy opens, which is extremely nice, especially if you have to let a Wolverine out. The fuel tank selector, you can select one of two tanks, one in each of the wing strakes. From cold and dark, you can turn this on, but I couldn't find a way to get it back to the cutoff position. But the good news is that's the only problem I found in the cockpit. I had no problem starting this from cold and dark first shot. No problems. Everything in the cockpit seems to work just fine. Go ahead and have a listen to the start and idle sounds of this. That was a start and then a high and low idle, which almost sound identical, and in comparison, this is a high and low idle in the real aircraft. It would be really nice to get some accurate sounds in this model. Not everything in this model has a sound, and there is no difference between the canopy open or closed, but getting some accurate sounds for this model could really bring it to the next level. The avionics all work, the transponder and radio panel work. Essentially, you can set the transponder code and the radio channels and swap them. That's about it. So they're not fully modeled, but they work as they need to. The GPS is your standard fare from the Icon, I believe, has the same one. The aircraft does exhibit some strange behaviors on the ground sometimes. It takes a lot of throttle to get it moving, but once it's moving, it will accelerate you at idle, well over 40 knots. That being said, other times I found it quite easy to get it moving, so I'm still unsure about what exactly is happening there. It has nose wheel steering, which it shouldn't. It should be steered by the brakes, but I'm guessing the developer had to make some design decisions because of the unique rudder pedals in this aircraft. In the real aircraft, they'd normally act independently of each other, meaning you could apply both left and right full rudder, one on each winglet, to act as an air brake. My rudder pedals personally wouldn't support that, as they are attached, and as I apply right rudder, the left rudder is reduced. This isn't the easiest plane to model in that respect, so I'm guessing some of these things were design decisions because of the unique rudders that this aircraft possesses. It also demonstrates some strange behavior on the runway, a number of different strange behaviors at different speeds, from rollout all the way through mid and takeoff, before rotate and after. I won't get into all of them, but there are a number of strange behaviors that happen. One of them in particular that I'll show you here is while following a certain procedure for takeoff, which is stick back until around 40 knots, where you can release a little bit of pressure, and then when the nose wheel comes up around 60 knots, you release a little bit more pressure again to keep the nose wheel off the runway, and then at 80 knots rotate and lift off. But with any amount of back pressure on the stick when you go full throttle to accelerate on your rollout, it somehow generates some magical lift, and you get a immediate tail strike, which is bad news in this aircraft, of course, because a tail strike is a prop strike. But we'll get up one way or another, and without any type of back pressure on the stick until at least 40 plus knots, we seem to make it up okay. There are a number of other strange behaviors on the runway, but this video will be much too long if I get into all of them. So we get up and into the air, and we're flying. I have to admit, on my first flight of this, the airspeed indicator screwed me up a bit, as it has a white arc painted on it, which led me to believe that there are flaps, which I thought otherwise on this plane, and of course was correct. The arcs also don't seem to represent any known V-speeds that I could figure out, so this led me to a early rotate on takeoff and a stall on final. I recovered easily enough, but it did throw me for a loop. I don't think it's worth getting into the stall characteristics of the aircraft, as the developer clearly noted that it won't be correct based on something that the simulator doesn't support, which is canard aircraft, of course. That being said, most of the default aircraft, or any of the aircraft for that matter, so far haven't really exhibited great stall characteristics. Slips and skids in this are plausible. They feel fine. Now, take a look at the roll authority as I roll left and right here, and how fast this aircraft rolls. I mean, it's fast for a GA aircraft, but it feels a little slow for a performance GA like this. But this is pretty close to what the actual aircraft's roll would be. Now pay attention when we roll again, and we roll full right and full right rudder at the same time. See how much quicker that is? That's extremely accurate to the real aircraft, in fact. So I think the developer should be commended for that. He is obviously paying attention. In my opinion, where this aircraft really shines is when you're exploring an area. Number one, it's quick enough to get around an area very quickly. And number two, the visibility in this aircraft, because of its canopy instead of a set of windows and pillars, for instance, and the fact that the main wing is aft, so it's not in your way when you're looking down, makes looking around and exploring in this aircraft probably second to none. On top of that, the rudder authority in this aircraft is incredible. That makes flying in and out and weaving in and out of tight places really not only enjoyable, but easy if you run into trouble. I find it easy enough to land, but you will want to make sure that you're familiar with your speed brakes or spoiler, hopefully mapped out somewhere on your flight stick or HOTAS if you have one, because the aircraft is a little bit difficult to slow down. There is no flaps, so your approach speed should be higher than 80 knots, and you'll want to use that brake to get you probably below even 100 knots. You probably have trouble getting this below 100 knots at idle without the help of your speed brake. As you can see here, as we're on approach, you can see the speed brake coming out from underneath the fuselage. If you're flying at night, the panel light when it's on, yes, a light in a canopy will create a giant white bright flash. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of how it's modeled, but I'm sure it's not the easiest thing to try and model, but you should be aware that that's what it does look like when it's on. When it's off, I think it looks great. I love the reflection on the bottom part of the glare shield. I think flying around at night, you're going to want your lights off anyways, and you normally wouldn't turn them on because they'd blind you. But you should be aware of that's the look of this instrument panel at night. And finally, I think what makes this aircraft desirable is the unique flight characteristics of it. Unfortunately, these are the things that either were not modeled or cannot be modeled according to the developer. In the developer's statements, I think he has understated this a bit while proposing that the characteristics may be different under extreme conditions. I don't think he's trying to be deceitful, but I don't feel this aircraft exhibits correct behavior in many normal conditions either. If these flight characteristics were all well modeled and the cockpit received a bit of an update in textures along with some decent sounds, this would be an easy recommendation. Without these things, it's a much tougher recommendation for me as it doesn't accurately reflect the aircraft that it's trying to replicate. Without that, you are left with an aircraft that doesn't feel next generation enough to stand on those merits alone and doesn't have enough authority or performance to be exciting on those aspects alone either. I realize the developer has made a statement to this effect, but that is a moot point in regards to its value to you in my review. It either does or doesn't do something. It doesn't really matter why. The developer has stated that as soon as he is able to update the flight model, he will. And from the looks of some posts in regards to his prior reputation in the flight sim community, I have no reason to think otherwise. He seems to listen to the community well and engage them during beta testing to ensure these are working before release. He has other models I'm excited to try, so I personally will be excited to try any updates in the flight model of this aircraft that he may offer in the future. I really hope that he takes notice in regards to his textures and sounds. Please check the top posted comment for any updates from myself on this very thing. If I see an improvement in this area, I'll be sure to let you know. It is fun to fly and has great visibility for flying low and slow or fast, and it is fast for this category of aircraft. It's great for exploring areas that you don't want to crawl along in a Cessna, and maybe the TBM or the likes is too fast and much harder to see out of. It's definitely an aircraft I enjoyed flying around Toronto area. In conclusion, the aircraft itself does work in most respects outside of the aforementioned flight model, and is a lot of fun to fly and operate. The price is not unreasonable, and if you're on the fence and decide to purchase this, I'm sure you will enjoy the time you spend with it. Just don't expect to learn anything about flying this one-of-a-kind design. With that, I hope you enjoyed, and if you're interested in this bird, I hope I've helped make your decision easier. Until next time, see you in the skies, guys.